Hi there. In this episode, a top 17 list. Anatek'S Pocket Series and some of their other small electronics. MIDI exploded like an atom bomb on the music industry in 1983. With that explosion came significantly more functionality. It also created a bunch of problems. Anate came into existence in the late 80s. They created many budget-priced, small little boxes that solved early issues when using MIDI technology. It also provided additional cool functionality. Today, I'm going to go through 17 of their products. Most of them are from their aptly named Pocket series. You can find these little boxes on eBay and Reverb for sale, both used and new old stock. Anate was a Canadian company, and they've been out of the music device business for a while. They and J.L. Cooper dominated this niche market of small helper electronics in the 80s and early 90s. Time for the list. At number 17, the Pocket Mac. The Pocket Mac is a budget-priced version of the Pocket Plus, which is also included in this list. It is a basic MIDI interface for Mac computers of the era. So by that I mean the late 80s and the early 90s. Number 16, the Power Pack. The Power Pack provides power when not available on small devices that need power. Unlike most of the Anate Pocket devices, this Pocket device needs to be plugged into mains power. It allows more Pocket devices to be daisy-chained. It's kind of like USB in that USB will allow you to power small devices that don't need a lot of power or a lot of current, such as memory card readers. But if you plug something more substantial into a USB port on your computer, that device can require additional mains power. Some KVM switches are like that. Anate recommends that no more than 4 of their Pocket devices be daisy-chained, but with the addition of this Power Pack, you can exceed 4 devices. It also allows some Pocket devices to retain their memory when connected to a MIDI device that is turned off. For example, the Pocket Pedal and the Pocket Filter. Also, it can be used as an extender for a longer run of MIDI cables. Number 15, the Pocket Curve. The Pocket Curve allows you to add velocity scaling to MIDI keyboards that output MIDI velocity but don't have that functionality. It has 18 preset curves and 6 constant velocity curves. Number 14, the Pocket Panic. You may know someone that should carry one of these devices with them at all times. However, it's only good for MIDI data. The Pocket Panic allows a MIDI panic message to be sent over all 16 channels. Just in case you don't know what a panic message is, it would be used to silence stuck MIDI notes. This unit does not require any external power. The little box has just a MIDI in and a MIDI out. It also has a foot switch input. On the front panel, there are buttons labeled O, Send, and C. To send a panic command, you can press the foot switch or the send button. Double-clicking the O button sends an Omni off command, and double-clicking the C button sends a controller off command. You can filter all notes off by holding the send button or holding the foot switch. The device has an LED that turns on and off in combinations of flashes to indicate specific functions and activities. Number 13, Pocket Through. That's kind of self-explanatory. The Pocket Through is a very simple 1 MIDI in, 3 MIDI throughs. 4 units could be chained together to create 9 MIDI throughs. While that's possible, there are less expensive alternatives, but a single unit has a lot of utility for the price. Number 12, the Pocket Transpose. The Pocket Transpose allows you to set different transpose intervals for each MIDI channel. A lot of early keyboards didn't have a transpose function. It has a pedal input that allows you to toggle between the transposed setting and the default while playing live or just jamming at home. For a live example, I can see a song modulating up a half or a whole step, and perhaps you don't want to have to learn to play the song in the new key. So you just hit the pedal at the appropriate time and you're sending a transposed MIDI stream. Transposing range is plus or minus 5 octaves, providing it falls within the allowable MIDI range of the lowest note and the highest MIDI pitch. Another use I can see is if you only had one keyboard and it didn't have a transpose function, but it did have a local on-off function, you could turn the local on-off to the off position, connect the MIDI out of your keyboard through the pocket transpose, and then back into the MIDI in, and voila, you've got a transpose function on your keyboard. That would be pretty cool. Number 11, the pocket split. The pocket split will split any MIDI keyboard into as many as 8 zones. Any and all channels can be sent from any zone. It even has a floating split mode to follow two-handed play. That's pretty cool. Number 10, MIDI match. This is an unusual name for what this unit does. MIDI extend or MIDI extender might have been a better name. This is actually 2 identical devices. Each device has a MIDI in, a MIDI out, an XLR male, and female connector. A pair of these allow MIDI signals to be sent over an XLR cable up to 4,000 feet. Since it uses XLR connectors, MIDI data can easily be routed through audio snakes. The maximum distance for routing MIDI through long MIDI cables is generally given as 50 feet. But this depends greatly on the quality of the devices connected and the quality of the cables. Usually 25 feet is not a problem, but beyond that, issues can occur, and usually it's things like stuck notes. Such long runs can be necessary at concerts, churches, and large studios. MIDI lighting is also very popular at casinos and other venues, and it has to run very long distances. Often, MIDI is used for MIDI lighting purposes. There's probably a lot of high-end proprietary tech out there now to do this today, but back in the 80s, this was a solution. Each MIDI match requires a 9-volt power supply. Number 9, pocket channel. This allows remapping of MIDI data to any MIDI channel. Some early tech would only transmit or receive on a limited set of channels, sometimes on only one channel. This little device solves that problem. Number 8, the pocket filter. The pocket filter removes specified data from the MIDI stream. Different data can be removed from different MIDI channels. It can also be used to channelize older synths to receive in omni mode only. Very useful in some situations. Number 7, the pocket mapper. The mapper allows you to reroute incoming modulation data such as breath controller, pitch bend, or aftertouch to any one of 15 supported controllers. These controllers are pitch bend, aftertouch, mod wheel, breath controller, foot controller, portamento time, data increment or decrement, volume, balance, pan, expression, controller, MIDI CC16, sustain, soft pedal, and chorus depth. Obviously, most of these controllers have an associated CC number. This little box uses a set of 8 dip switches. The first 4 dip switches, labeled 1 through 4, select the MIDI controller data type to remap. You can think of it as selecting the source MIDI controller type. The second 4 dip switches, labeled 5 through 8, select the destination MIDI controller type. There is a MIDI input jack and a MIDI output jack. There is also a single LED. The LED lights up when current is present to power the unit, and it flashes when MIDI information is passing through the device to give you some feedback. No external power is necessary. Pretty cool little device. Number 6, the Pocket Plus. The Pocket Plus is the more robust of the two MIDI interfaces made for Mac computers for this era. That is circa 1990. I already talked about the Pocket Mac. This unit has the Pocket Merge functionality built in, and it also provides power to other Pocket interfaces, like the Power Pack. Number 5, Pocket Record. The Pocket Record is a single-track MIDI recorder. You can think of it as a scratch pad. It records on all 16 channels and will record MIDI system exclusive data. It has a 15,000 event capacity, which is pretty generous. It can store 30K of sysx data. It retains its memory for 4 hours when not connected to a MIDI device that is supplying it power. There is an optional battery plug that will retain memory for the life of the battery. Now, I don't exactly know what that looks like or how it works, but you might be able to create something yourself if you're handy with electronics. Other than that, you would probably want to look for one of the devices that already has it when you buy it used. Number 4, Pocket Sequencer. The Pocket Sequencer is a 16-track sequencer with a 7,000 note capacity. You don't get much editing, but you can quantize, overdub, and punch in. It's the bare basics. Essentially, you have to keep playing the part until you get it right, or send it over MIDI from your DAW or hardware sequencer. Units came with a 256K RAM card. Number 3, the Pocket Pedal. The Pocket Pedal allows 2 pedals to be connected to send several MIDI data types, including pitch bend, modulation, portamento time, MIDI volume, sustain pedal, portamento on-off, sostenuto pedal, sequencer start-stop commands. Suggested uses are as a MIDI controller for guitar synths, because it can send MIDI data on multiple channels simultaneously. You can also use it to add pedal to devices that don't have a pedal input, like sustain for a Yamaha TX7 module and other MIDI modules. Number 2, the Pocket Sync. The Pocket Sync allows you to sync MIDI devices to tape at a budget price. A general purpose would be to sync a sequencer, hardware or computer-based, to a multi-track tape machine. Back in the day, before we moved to ADATs and then to Cubase, a friend and I used to use a Fostex 8-track machine. We would record the acoustic tracks like vocals and guitars on tape and sync the tape machine to an external sequencer to provide MIDI tracks of additional music and then mix down to stereo. I believe it was a Fostex Model 80, and we had to give up 1 track to record a sync tone. The Pocket Sync uses FSK, which is frequency shift keying, and I'm not going to get into what that is. You record the FSK to a track on the tape machine and then play it back into the Pocket Sync, which generates the necessary MIDI timing data on the other end. The device has a MIDI in, a MIDI out, an audio in, and an audio out. A lot of hardware sequencers in the 80s and beyond could generate and read time code, so a box like this wouldn't be necessary. Still, if you need to sync MIDI devices to tape, this is an inexpensive option, and some early budget sequencers didn't have tape sync functionality. There is a red LED and a green LED. The devices light up to give you feedback depending on the operating mode. It's not the kind of feedback that we're used to today, but it's enough to make things work and give you some feedback. It has some capabilities to overcome dropouts. Dropouts are just when the sync on the tape has degraded and it can't read it reliably and generate the time code, so it will freewheel for a short period of time and then resync again with the time code. It's a cool feature to have. Number 1, the Pocket Merge. This unit allows you to merge 2 MIDI inputs. For example, if you have two master controller keyboards, you would run the MIDI out of each keyboard into the two inputs on this device, and it would merge the data to the MIDI output port. From there, you could just daisy chain all your other MIDI devices. From what I remember, the Pocket Merge was Anatek's most popular device and sold approximately 10,000 units. One or two of these units might be a good investment to overcome a few limitations. However, by the late 80s, there were more robust rack mount devices out there. I used two Yamaha MJC8s and one Digital Equipment Corporation MX-8. The MJC8s are simply MIDI routers. The MX-8 has other functionality like merging, filtering, rechanneling, velocity cross-switching, transposing, digital delay, companding, and mapping. Essentially, you're getting 5 or 6 of the Anate Pocket devices in one unit with patch memory, 6 MIDI inputs, and 8 MIDI outputs, and other functions. You can pick up an MX-8 in the range of $50 to $100. So some Anate devices are really not a good value, not as much as they were back when they were new. In those days, an MJC8 and an MX-8 were probably several $100s, and one of these Pocket devices was closer to $100, so it was a much better value. Personally, I always wanted a JL Cooper Synapse, which has 16 MIDI inputs and 20 MIDI outputs. It also has a lot of MIDI functions like data filtering, channel filtering, rechanneling, velocity scaling, and transposing. One time, I had a ridiculous number of MIDI devices. It was something like 45. And I thought that one of these devices would be just great rather than having 3 devices. You can occasionally find the Synapse for sale on the used market, but they tend to sell used for about the same price they were when they were new, or close to that, which was $599. They're pretty rare devices. I was recently watching one on Reverb and it sold for a little over $500. That's it for this episode. Hopefully I haven't wasted your time. Take care, and I'll be back in another episode soon.